My life wasn't supposed to be like this. When Alex and I first met in college, he was a sweet, gentle guy who seemed to understand and care for me in ways that I hadn't experienced before. We were both young, full of hope and ambition, and ready to take on the world. He was the friend who cheered me up after a tough exam, who stayed up with me during long study sessions, and who whispered, "We're going to make it," as if our future together was already written. In those days, I had so much faith in us and him. His protectiveness wasn't overbearing back then. It felt like a warm cocoon around me, something safe. He had my back no matter what, and I loved that about him. We dated for years, growing together and navigating the twists and turns of life. While we faced our share of ups and downs, like any couple, I genuinely thought he was my forever. I remember the night he proposed, a moment etched in my memory with stunning clarity. We were in the park where we'd had our first date, under the same sprawling oak tree where we'd laughed, shared dreams, and started weaving our lives together. Alex got down on one knee, holding a delicate ring that glinted softly in the moonlight, and my heart swelled. It was perfect. Our whirlwind engagement led to a wedding filled with family, friends, laughter, and the kind of love I thought could conquer anything. But after the honeymoon glow faded, small cracks began to appear. At first, they were so minor that I brushed them off as normal marital adjustments. However, those little cracks widened, darkening our once bright life together. The sweet man who had been my partner became a stranger, his protective nature mutating into something far more controlling. After we settled into married life, the changes crept in slowly, almost imperceptibly. The questions he asked when I'd go out with friends seemed innocuous, even caring. "Where are you going? How long will you be out? And who are you meeting?" His smile was there, but something felt different, like an undertone, a flicker of something guarded in his gaze. I chalked it up to new husband jitters. Maybe he was just protective. Maybe he wanted to keep me safe. After all, we were newly married. Surely, this was just him being attentive. But the questions became more persistent. His curiosity about my whereabouts evolved into an expectation that I'd check in with him at all times. A harmless call to let him know I'd arrived at my friend's house quickly turned into hourly texts. If I was a few minutes late or missed one of his check-ins, he'd grow anxious, often spiraling into a series of probing messages. "Where are you? Who's there with you? Did anyone approach you?" One evening, I returned home from a girls' night out, and Alex was waiting by the window pacing. His face was tense, and his questions this time carried an edge I hadn't noticed before. He bombarded me with inquiries, pressing for every detail. I shrugged it off as a rare burst of jealousy. Yet that night, as I lay beside him, unable to sleep, something within me felt a little off. With each passing week, his protectiveness grew more suffocating. It started with innocent gestures that any loving partner might do, little checks, occasional concerns, but these escalated into behaviors I hadn't anticipated. He began reading my text messages, scrolling through my phone without asking, always with some excuse about keeping us safe or of making sure no one was taking advantage of me. At first, I believed he was just looking out for us. However, I soon found myself choosing my words carefully, avoiding casual interactions with anyone who might trigger his suspicions. It was as if my actions were pre-filtered, my own behavior modified to keep the peace. Then came the conversations about finances, and that's when my sense of security truly began to unravel. We had originally agreed to keep separate bank accounts. I valued my financial independence, and Alex had seemed to respect that. At least he did during our engagement. But one evening, as we sat down for dinner, he brought up the topic with a strange intensity. "Why don't we merge our accounts?" he asked, holding my hand a little too tightly. "It'll be easier to manage everything if we're a team in every way." He was so earnest, his eyes fixed on mine, as though trying to read every thought flickering behind them. I paused uncertain. "We've been managing things fine separately," I replied. It feels better for me to have that little bit of independence." His expression hardened, and his grip tightened. "Independence? Don't you trust me? Isn't that what marriage is about?" The way he said it sent a shiver through me. It was more than a question. It felt like an accusation, as though I was betraying him by wanting something of my own. Still, I tried to brush off my discomfort, chalking it up to a momentary disagreement. But he kept bringing it up day after day, his words laced with guilt-tripping undertones. "Why don't you want to share things with me?" he'd ask, a hurt expression on his face. I began to feel like I was the unreasonable one for resisting, but my gut told me otherwise. That gut feeling hit like a freight train a few days before Alex's business trip to California. He called me into the living room, a small electronic device in his hands, and a peculiar look on his face. "I got this for you," he said, holding it out with an oddly calm smile. "It's a tracker." I stared at him, horrified, unable to hide my shock. "A tracker? Just something small, harmless, that you can clip onto your waistband while I'm away. That way I'll know you're safe. Just in case something happens." The way he said it, like it was a gesture of love and care, made my skin crawl. His words felt rational, but the look in his eyes told a different story. A story of dominance and control, disguised as concern. I tried to keep my voice steady, resisting the urge to shout. "No, Alex, I won't wear a tracker." His smile faded, replaced by a hard, silent resentment that sent a chill through me. He didn't argue, but the look in his eyes told me everything. He was furious. I could almost feel the walls closing in, the cage around me tightening. I knew then that I couldn't stay in this marriage. The man I loved had become someone I barely recognized. Someone who wanted to possess me rather than cherish me. Desperate for advice, I reached out to his family, hoping they'd help me see this wasn't as dark as it felt. But their response was far from reassuring. His mother dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand, calling him protective and saying it was a sign of love. "Men in our family are just like that," she added, as though that made it acceptable. Her words made me realize I was alone. If I wanted to escape, I'd have to do it on my own. The moment Alex left for California, I felt a window open, a narrow chance to break free. I knew it was now or never. But even with this sliver of opportunity, fear clawed at me. My family was distant, and the friends I had were mostly mutual, making it risky to confide in anyone without it somehow reaching him. I couldn't leave any trace, so I began planning in silence, meticulously mapping out each step, as though I was preparing for a high-stakes escape. I started with the essentials, gathering my passport, birth certificate, and banking information. I tucked them away in the lining of a suitcase I kept hidden, each item a piece of my future, each step laced with the risk of being discovered. I'd read stories online about women in similar situations, and their advice was clear. Check for cameras. My heart raced as I inspected every corner, and to my horror, I found 3. There was one in the kitchen, another in the living room, and the final one in the bedroom corner, staring down at me like a silent sentinel. The discovery left me shaken, my stomach twisting with a mix of fear and anger. Knowing he'd been watching me even in our most private moments was horrifying. But I knew I couldn't let on that I'd found them. I left the cameras untouched, continuing my routine as if nothing had changed. Each movement, each expression, was carefully controlled, while inside I was panicking. I contacted my workplace, explaining my situation in the vaguest terms possible. To my immense relief, my manager understood and began discreetly checking for open positions in other states. Every day, I felt the clock ticking down to Alex's return, a countdown that filled me with equal parts hope and dread. I had to act quickly, but I had to be cautious, calculating every move. On the advice of others who had escaped similar situations, I reached out to a lawyer specializing in family law. During our meetings, she examined the documents I'd managed to copy from Alex's files. What she found left me reeling. Among the usual financial agreements, she uncovered clauses regarding hypothetical children and detailed plans for merging all assets. Alex had meticulously crafted a future where I would be financially and emotionally bound to him. Each clause a chain in the life he planned to control. Realizing this only strengthened my resolve. I began looking into relocation options, scouring housing in 3 different cities my job might transfer me to. My lawyer advised me to avoid creating any digital footprint. No searches, no emails, nothing that could lead him to my plans. Even small things like changing my phone number and switching banks became part of a strategy to disappear completely. The night before my escape, a storm rolled in, bringing heavy rain and fierce winds. The weather was brutal, but I saw it as an opportunity, a perfect cover to leave undetected. I hired a discreet moving service, asking them to come late at night, and paid them extra to ensure their silence. They loaded only the essentials, leaving behind all traces of the life I was abandoning. Shared furniture, gifts, anything Alex might try to claim later. I felt my heart pounding with every sound outside, every gust of wind that rattled the windows. But the adrenaline kept me focused. Finally, when everything was packed, I left a brief text for Alex. Power's out because of the storm. I'll update you tomorrow. I attached a video of the rain-soaked street outside to make it believable, then wiped my phone and left it on the counter. Switching to a prepaid phone, I drove away in the dead of night, glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights following me. But the road behind was empty. I reached the airport just as dawn began to break, its soft light contrasting with the turbulent night I'd just left behind. My heart still raced, but there was a strange calm in the early morning quiet, a hint of freedom just beginning to take shape. As I boarded the plane, I felt the weight of years lift, but the residue of Alex's control still lingered. I was free in body, but my mind was haunted by his voice, his gaze, his grip on my life. Once I landed in the new city, I went straight to a hotel. Looking out from my window at the unfamiliar skyline, I felt both exhilarated and drained, like I was suspended between two lives, the one I'd left behind and the one I was yet to build. Over the next few days, I focused on practical tasks, apartment hunting, updating my job about my relocation, and working with my lawyer to ensure every loose end was tied up. I found a small but secure apartment in a gated building, with security features that brought me a rare sense of peace. But living alone, completely cut off from the people I once trusted, was harder than I'd expected. Some days, the isolation weighed on me, and I'd catch myself instinctively looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Alex's shadow lurking nearby. Even in this new life, his influence clung to me like an invisible shroud, dictating my habits and instilling a lingering fear. Therapy became my anchor, helping me unpack the layers of manipulation I'd been subjected to and guiding me in reclaiming my sense of self. Meanwhile, my lawyer kept me updated on Alex's state of mind. When he returned to find an empty house and divorce papers waiting, he spiraled into a rage. Friends who hadn't taken sides reported that he'd trashed parts of the house, putting holes in the walls and shattering furniture. According to my lawyer, Alex was livid, unable to accept that I'd escaped his grasp. He bombarded me with a barrage of emails and messages, veering wildly between desperate apologies and angry accusations. But I ignored them all, letting my lawyer handle the communication. One message stood out among the rest, and it came not from Alex but from his sister. She accused me of abandoning my duties as a wife, claiming I was ungrateful and didn't appreciate the security Alex provided. She even tried to justify his financial control, calling it a sign of stability that women in their family valued. Her words revealed a toxic family dynamic that likely shaped Alex into the person he had become. My lawyer, noting the twisted irony in her words, decided to forward the message to the organization where Alex's sister volunteered as an advocate for domestic violence victims. Within a week, I received word that she'd been dismissed from her role, a form of justice that felt strangely poetic. It was a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained their family's mindset was, and yet here I was finally disentangling myself from it. Living on my own, I began the painstaking process of rediscovering who I was without Alex's shadow looming over me. Simple things, like choosing groceries or spending money without consulting anyone, felt liberating yet foreign. Some days, I'd catch myself hesitating over small purchases, still hearing his voice in my head questioning my choices. Therapy helped, providing a safe space to confront these ingrained habits and reclaim parts of myself I'd buried long ago. I also started journaling, documenting each step of my journey, each struggle and triumph. At first, my entries were filled with anger and confusion, but gradually, they transformed into reflections on resilience and growth. Writing down my story became a way to make sense of my past and envision a future that was truly mine. Eventually, The time came for the final court session. Alex and I were required to attend mediation, albeit virtually, and the thought of facing him again filled me with a strange mix of dread and determination. As the session began, his face appeared on the screen cold and rigid. Instead of apologies, he rattled off a list of demands that bordered on absurdity. He wanted me to retract everything I'd said about him, to publicly apologize, and even to pay him for emotional damages, claiming I'd caused him immeasurable stress. The judge listened patiently but saw through his tactics. Each demand was dismissed, and when Alex grew belligerent, the judge reprimanded him, with a cutting remark about how he seemed more interested in control than in resolving anything. In a moment I'll never forget, the judge turned to me and said, "You deserve your freedom. You don't owe him anything." Those words felt like a seal on my liberation. The divorce was finalized, cutting Alex out of my life permanently. I was free. After the court's decision, I moved into a small, cozy apartment in a quiet part of town, far from the life I'd left behind. It was a modest space, but it was mine, a sanctuary free from memories of Alex. I spent my first days decorating, carefully choosing each piece of furniture, each painting, to reflect the person I was becoming rather than the one I had been. I filled the space with plants, their quiet resilience a comforting presence, and hung up artwork that I loved, letting each detail remind me of my newfound freedom. The adjustment wasn't easy. For the first few weeks, I struggled with an emptiness I hadn't anticipated. I'd imagined that leaving Alex would make everything better immediately, but there were scars, emotional imprints that still held sway over my mind. Simple tasks, cooking for one, deciding how to spend my weekend, felt overwhelming, and I often found myself double-checking each decision, as if I were still under his judgmental gaze. Therapy remained a lifeline during these days. My therapist encouraged me to reclaim parts of my identity that I'd abandoned, suggesting small, empowering acts, trying new recipes, exploring the city, or even going to a movie alone. Bit by bit, I was building a life that was mine, rediscovering pieces of myself that had been lost in the fog of Alex's control. One session, my therapist proposed an exercise, writing a letter to my future self, envisioning the life I wanted without the weight of my past. I poured my heart into that letter, describing a life filled with joy, laughter, and genuine connection. I wrote about the person I aspired to become, strong, independent, and unafraid. This letter became my North Star, a reminder of the journey I was on and the freedom that lay ahead. Every now and then, my lawyer would update me on Alex's situation. His life, once meticulously controlled, had begun to unravel. His erratic behavior and anger had cost him his job, and rumors circulated that he was struggling to find stability. He had tried to contact several mutual friends, seeking information about me, but each attempt only served to alienate those who'd once defended him. He even showed up at my former workplace, demanding to know my whereabouts, but they turned him away, reinforcing the boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish. The news of Alex's desperate attempts to locate me felt surreal, like echoes from a life I was slowly leaving behind. Hearing about his actions stirred a mix of relief and lingering fear. But I knew I couldn't let him define my life any longer. With each passing day, I grew stronger, grounding myself in the present and the possibilities of my future. As the months wore on, I realized I had to make peace with more than just Alex's memory. I had to let go of the friends we once shared too. Despite years of shared experiences, many of them had downplayed his behavior, dismissing my need to escape as an overreaction. Some even insisted that Alex's controlling tendencies were just overprotectiveness, as if I'd misunderstood him. I made one last effort to explain my side, sharing how his possessiveness had eroded my sense of self. But their responses were full of platitudes, brushing off my pain with phrases about marriage being hard work. It was painful to let go, but I knew that if they couldn't understand what I'd endured, they couldn't be part of my future. I stopped answering their messages, letting our connections fade, and instead focused on building new friendships with people who saw me as the person I was becoming, rather than the woman they once knew through Alex's lens. Months later, the day of my final court appearance arrived, a mediation session held over Zoom. This would be the last time, I'd ever have to see Alex's face. As the screen connected, I saw him sitting there, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. He launched into a litany of complaints and demands, calling for apologies, retractions, and even financial compensation for emotional damages, claiming I'd ruined his life. But the judge was unmoved, seeing through his attempts to manipulate the situation. Each of his demands was methodically dismissed, and as Alex's frustration mounted, the judge finally interrupted, saying, "Mr. Lawson, this mediation is about closure, not control. Your wife deserves peace." With those words, the last thread holding me to Alex snapped, and the divorce was granted. I was free, not only in the legal sense, but in a deeply personal way that felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for far too long. In the weeks following the final court session, my life gradually began to settle into a new rhythm. My apartment became my haven, a space filled with peace and reflection. The plants I'd carefully chosen thrived in the sunlight streaming through the windows, each leaf and flower a symbol of my own growth. I found myself savoring the quiet, the freedom to just be without the constant need to prove or justify myself. I took up hobbies I'd long neglected, painting, cooking elaborate dishes, even attempting yoga. Each small act was a reclamation, a step toward rediscovering who I was without the weight of someone else's expectations. One day, I picked up a canvas and began painting for the first time in years. The colors flowed freely, vibrant and bold, as if they were waiting to break free, much like I had been. With every brushstroke, I felt a piece of myself returning. My therapist, always supportive, encouraged me to continue exploring these pieces of myself that had been buried. In one session, he asked me to consider not just what I'd escaped from, but what I was moving toward. This shift in perspective opened something in me. For the first time, I wasn't simply running from my past. I was building a future. Gradually, I began forming new friendships with people who knew nothing of Alex or the scars I carried. These friendships were light, unburdened by history, and filled with genuine interest and laughter. There was a beauty in meeting people who saw me simply as me, not as the person Alex had shaped. Months passed, and with each day, the echoes of my old life grew fainter. Then one evening, as I sat watching the sunset from my apartment balcony, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat, a flicker of fear momentarily tightening my chest. But as I read the message, I realized it was from my former boss, a brief but reassuring note to let me know Alex had attempted to contact her again, demanding to know my whereabouts. She firmly turned him away, reminding him of the boundaries I'd set. Reading her message, I felt a swell of gratitude for the support I'd found in unexpected places. Though Alex's attempts to track me down were unsettling, I was resolute. He no longer held any power over me, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would never let him back into my life. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully exhale, the tension I'd carried for so long finally dissolving into the evening air. The chapter with Alex was closed, a part of my story, but no longer the defining piece. As I continued to rebuild my life, I noticed changes not only in my surroundings, but also within myself. I moved through each day with a newfound strength, a quiet confidence that had been absent for so long. The small victories, meeting a new friend, trying a new recipe, or even rearranging my apartment, began to feel like triumphs, reminders of my resilience. One evening, my therapist suggested a final exercise to help me put the past to rest. Writing a farewell letter to Alex, not one to send, but one to help me release any lingering ties. I sat down, pen in hand, and let the words flow. I wrote about the love I'd once felt, the trust I'd placed in him, and the betrayal of that trust. I poured out my grief, my anger, and finally my forgiveness, not for his sake, but for mine. When I finished, I folded the letter and tucked it away, feeling lighter than I had in years. It was as if that letter had gathered the last remnants of my pain and let them rest in the past, allowing me to fully step into the life I was creating. In the following weeks, I found myself daring to dream again. I made plans for the future, considering everything from career aspirations to travel destinations. For the first time, my life felt wide open, unbounded by anyone else's expectations. I started volunteering at a local shelter, giving my time to causes that mattered to me. I reconnected with distant family members and forged new bonds that felt grounded and genuine. One day, while out for a walk, I realized something profound. I had truly reclaimed my story. No longer was I the woman defined by a painful past, but a woman with a resilient spirit and an open heart. I was free, not just from Alex, but from the hold he'd had over my mind and soul. My story was mine alone, and I was ready to write each new chapter on my terms, embracing the peace, joy, and independence I had fought so hard to achieve. And as I looked up at the vast open sky, I felt for the first time an overwhelming sense of hope and possibility stretching out before me. With each passing day, that hope blossomed into a deep-seated belief in my own strength. I embraced a quiet contentment in the rhythm of my days. A morning walk through the park, a chat with neighbors who knew me simply as I was now, not the woman I had been. I had finally arrived in a life of my own making, unburdened by expectations, free to grow and change without fear of judgment. My career began to flourish as I poured myself into work with a focus and passion I hadn't felt in years. Colleagues started to notice, offering opportunities and encouraging me to take on projects that challenged and excited me. I took on leadership roles, speaking up in ways I once held back from. With every new project, I felt my confidence and sense of purpose strengthening, reinforcing that I was not only capable but thriving. A few months later, I even decided to take a leap and plan a solo trip, a journey I'd always dreamed of but never dared to pursue. I booked a modest trip to a small coastal town, a place where the ocean stretched out endlessly, mirroring the openness I felt inside. Standing on that shoreline, with the waves crashing against the rocks, I allowed myself a moment of reflection, gratitude washing over me like the tide. I realized that I had at long last found my way back to myself. Each day on that trip was a testament to my journey. I explored, wandered, and laughed freely, savoring every moment as it came. I captured photos not for anyone else, but for myself, small mementos of this chapter that marked the beginning of a truly liberated life. As I returned home, I knew I was carrying something precious with me, not just memories, but a newfound resilience and a sense of joy that no one could take away. This was my life, my journey, and for the first time, I felt completely at peace with both my past and my future. I was ready to embrace all that lay ahead, empowered by the knowledge that I was indeed finally free. The next chapter of my life unfolded with a quiet, steady rhythm, one that felt like a beautiful contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. The peace I found wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was grounded in small, everyday moments that gradually became my new normal. I found myself savoring these moments, like the simple pleasure of watching a sunrise from my window, or the comfort of a good book on a rainy afternoon. These little pieces of life, often overlooked, became markers of my journey to wholeness. I began documenting these moments, capturing snapshots of my days in a journal that had once been filled with pain and uncertainty, but now brimmed with gratitude and hope. Looking back through the pages, I could see a clear transformation, a story that had shifted from survival to renewal. Each entry was a testament to my resilience, a reminder of how far I'd come. One weekend, while organizing my things, I stumbled upon the letter I'd written to Alex, the farewell that had helped me release the final remnants of our painful history. I unfolded it, reading through the words with a gentle detachment, feeling neither anger nor sadness. Instead, there was only peace. I realized I no longer needed that letter to remind me of my strength. It had served its purpose, and I was ready to let it go. With a sense of quiet closure, I took the letter to the beach, letting the wind carry it away as I watched it drift into the waves. I felt a lightness settle over me, a final release of the last shadows of my past. It was as though the ocean had taken that piece of my story, absorbing it and leaving me with only the present moment, fresh and open. In the months that followed, I embraced my newfound freedom with a confidence that grew stronger each day. I made new friends, explored passions I'd long forgotten, and even began sharing my story with others, hoping it might inspire them to find their own strength. My life had become a journey, not defined by what I'd left behind, but by the endless possibilities ahead. And so, I walked forward, no longer looking over my shoulder, fully present, ready to live each day with an open heart. The horizon stretched out before me, vast and full of promise, and I felt for the first time, completely and beautifully free. As time moved on, I grew even more comfortable in this life I'd crafted for myself. The world felt different, brighter, fuller, and brimming with opportunities one once thought were out of reach. Each morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose and gratitude, a feeling of joy that came simply from being free, from knowing that my life was mine to shape. I began volunteering at a community center, helping others who had endured similar situations. Listening to their stories reminded me of my own journey, and each time I offered them words of hope, I felt my own strength deepen. Empowering others became a new passion, a way of giving back and ensuring that no one else would feel as alone as I once had. Through this work, I met people who became like family, kindred spirits who had faced their own battles and come out stronger. We bonded over shared experiences and celebrated each other's victories, big and small. For the first time in years, I felt deeply connected, surrounded by people who knew and valued me for who I truly was. One evening, at a gathering with these newfound friends, someone asked me about my future dreams. Without hesitation, I shared aspirations that had once felt impossible, a desire to travel, to start a small business, to continue writing and sharing my journey. They listened, their faces lighting up with encouragement, and I realized that these dreams no longer felt like distant fantasies. They were within reach, tangible and real. With each step forward, I felt the chapters of my story building into something beautiful and uniquely mine. I'd transformed the pain of my past into a foundation for a future that was open, filled with purpose, connection, and joy. And as I looked around at the life I'd created, I knew I'd not only survived, I had truly begun to live. As the seasons changed, so did I, blossoming in ways I hadn't thought possible. I found a newfound rhythm in the life I'd pieced together, one that allowed me to dream without limits. With each passing day, my fears faded, replaced by a strength that felt unbreakable, forged through resilience and self-love. The life I lived now was vibrant, colorful, and entirely my own, unchained from the shadows of the past. One of the biggest shifts came when I decided to pursue one of my longtime dreams, opening a small cafe. It had been a distant dream, something I'd often spoken about, but never felt brave enough to chase. But now the vision of a cozy space filled with the smell of coffee, laughter, and warmth felt like more than just a wish. It felt like my purpose. So with a mixture of excitement and nerves, I threw myself into planning, pouring my heart into every detail. With the support of my friends and newfound family, the cafe began to take shape. From picking out furniture to designing the menu, every choice felt deeply personal, a celebration of my journey and resilience. I named it New Beginnings, a tribute to all the fresh starts that had brought me here. When the cafe finally opened, the community embraced it wholeheartedly. People gathered there, connecting over warm drinks and heartfelt conversations, and I watched it grow into a place where stories were shared, friendships blossomed, and hope found a home. It became a haven for others, much like the one I had needed during my darkest days. And there, amid the hum of life in the cafe, I found a new sense of fulfillment, a happiness that was no longer tied to anyone else's approval. My life was whole, a mosaic of all the experiences I'd lived through, every piece forming the beautiful, intricate picture of who I had become. I was no longer haunted by the past but rather empowered by it, moving forward with purpose, love, and a heart wide open to the future. In every cup of coffee served, every story shared, and every smile exchanged, I felt the incredible peace of finally being truly, unshakably free. With each day that passed, New Beginnings became more than just a cafe. It became a sanctuary, a place of healing and connection for everyone who walked through its doors. People would come in for a quiet moment or a warm drink, and leave with smiles, lighter and brighter than when they arrived. Regulars began to recognize each other, friendships forming over familiar conversations, and in a way, the cafe created its own little family. And for me, this place was a living testament to everything I'd overcome. The cafe's walls were adorned with artwork from local artists, pieces filled with color, hope, and life. Art that reflected the journey from darkness to light. I loved watching people's faces as they took in each painting or photograph, the emotions sparking memories of my own path to freedom. Then, one evening, as I was closing up, a woman came in, looking weary but kind. She hesitated, glancing around, and then approached the counter with a shy smile. She thanked me for creating a place that felt so welcoming, saying that she, too, was navigating her way out of a difficult past. We spoke for a while, sharing stories and reflections, and I realized that this was the reason I'd started New Beginnings. It wasn't just for me. It was for others seeking solace, hope, and the courage to start again. That night, as I locked the doors and walked home, under the soft glow of the streetlights, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had turned my pain into a place of hope and healing, a legacy built not from bitterness, but from resilience. My life had become a continuous journey of growth, love, and the power to uplift others. And so, with each dawn, I woke not just as someone who had survived, but as someone who thrived, eager to welcome whatever the future held. My story was my own, and it was beautiful, full of warmth, courage, and the undeniable joy of true freedom. In the quiet moments after closing each night, I would stand in the empty cafe, reflecting on how far I'd come. The sounds of laughter, the clinking of mugs, and the soft hum of conversation that filled the space during the day felt like echoes of the life I had reclaimed. Every detail of New Beginnings, from the carefully chosen books lining the shelves to the little notes of encouragement left by customers, was a reminder of resilience and renewal. As the cafe grew in popularity, it became a hub for support and connection in the community. People came to celebrate their successes, find solace in difficult times, or simply enjoy a moment of calm in a hectic world. We started hosting monthly gatherings, from open mic nights to small workshops focused on creativity and self-care. It was beautiful to witness, a cycle of healing and joy that seemed to ripple outwards, touching lives in ways I'd only dreamed of. One evening, as I was preparing for an upcoming storytelling night, I received a letter in the mail. It was from a woman who had visited the cafe during one of the community events. She wrote that New Beginnings had given her the courage to leave an unhealthy relationship, to reclaim her life in ways she'd never thought possible. Her words brought tears to my eyes, a poignant reminder of the impact this little cafe had beyond its walls. From that day forward, I began writing a book, capturing the journey that had led me here and the stories of resilience I'd witnessed in the cafe. It was my way of sharing everything I'd learned, of reaching out to others who might still be searching for their own freedom. Page by page, I poured out my heart, weaving together tales of hope and healing. As the first chapter of my book neared completion, I felt a sense of wholeness I hadn't known was possible. I was living proof that a life once shattered could be rebuilt into something beautiful. New Beginnings had become more than a cafe. It was a beacon of strength, a place where people could see that even in the face of darkness, there was always light ahead. And in that quiet, fulfilled life I'd crafted, I finally understood that my greatest achievement wasn't just surviving. It was thriving, with a heart wide open to love, growth, and the infinite possibilities that awaited. As my book took shape, it became more than just a personal project. It was a testament to the power of transformation, a story woven from pain, resilience, and healing. Each chapter flowed with raw honesty, capturing not only my journey, but the experiences of those who had walked through the doors of New Beginnings. The stories were powerful, each one a reminder of how profoundly human connections can heal and inspire. Word about the book spread, and soon, I found myself receiving messages from people far and wide who resonated with the story. Some shared their own tales of strength, others simply offered words of encouragement. It felt surreal, knowing that my journey had become a source of hope for others, like a ripple effect of healing reaching beyond what I could have imagined. Then came an invitation to speak at a small conference focused on resilience and empowerment. At first, the idea of standing in front of strangers, sharing my story felt daunting, but I remembered the courage that had brought me this far. Accepting the invitation, I knew that this was my chance to be a voice for others who hadn't yet found theirs. On the day of the event, I stepped onto the stage, taking a deep breath as I looked out at the audience. As I spoke, I felt a profound connection with every person there, as if we were all part of the same journey, each of us finding strength in the shared human experience. When I finished, the applause was warm and heartfelt, and people approached me afterward with words of gratitude and encouragement. I realized then that by telling my story, I was helping others see that they too could reclaim their lives. Returning home, I felt an even deeper sense of purpose. New Beginnings was thriving, the book was nearly complete, and my own life was filled with the peace I had once thought impossible. I had transformed my pain into something beautiful, something that lifted others as well as myself. And as I stood behind the counter at the cafe, greeting customers, serving coffee, and hearing their stories, I knew that my journey was far from over. Life was filled with endless chapters, each one an opportunity for growth, connection, and above all, hope. I was ready for whatever lay ahead, grateful for every moment and finally undeniably free. In the days that followed, life settled into a rhythm both peaceful and full of purpose. The cafe continued to thrive, and with each passing day, I was reminded of the beauty in human resilience. Customers often shared their stories with me over a cup of coffee, small snippets of their lives that reflected struggles and triumphs, each one reinforcing the purpose of New Beginnings. It had grown into something more than just a business. It was a place of community, a sanctuary for those on their own journeys of healing and self-discovery. As I wrapped up the final pages of my book, I felt a profound sense of closure, a realization that I had come full circle. The narrative I'd once felt trapped in had transformed into one of freedom and strength, woven with the experiences of countless others who had shared their stories in the cafe. Writing the last chapter was an emotional moment, like closing a door on the past and stepping fully into the life I'd built. The book, much like the cafe, was a symbol of everything I'd overcome and the freedom I now held. Shortly after the book's release, I held a small event at the cafe to celebrate. Friends, new and old, gathered in the space I'd created, each of them a part of my journey. I spoke a few words about the importance of resilience, of turning pain into strength, and as I looked out over the crowd, I felt a surge of gratitude. Life, once shattered, had been rebuilt into something infinitely stronger, woven with love, compassion, and a deep sense of purpose. The evening ended with laughter and warmth, the cafe filled with a glow that extended far beyond its walls. I realized that my story, once so painful, had blossomed into something beautiful, something that resonated with others and gave them hope. And as I closed up the cafe that night, turning off the lights and locking the door, I felt a peace settle over me, a quiet contentment that went beyond words. Life stretched before me, open and full of possibility, and for the first time, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I had the strength to face it. I had not only survived but had built a life filled with meaning, with kindness, and with an unshakable sense of freedom. And as I walked home under the stars, I knew that this was only the beginning of a life fully and joyfully lived. The weeks following the book release were filled with a quiet satisfaction. Each day, I would see familiar faces at the cafe, some there to share a story, others just seeking a warm, inviting space. The cafe had become a living, breathing testament to my journey, and every time I walked through its doors, I felt the deep peace of knowing I was exactly where I was meant to be. One afternoon, a young woman approached me at the counter. She was holding a copy of my book, her eyes brimming with gratitude. She told me that my story had inspired her to make a change in her own life, to find her voice and her strength. Her words touched me deeply, a reminder of why I'd chosen to share my journey in the first place. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was part of a larger tapestry of resilience, woven together by everyone who had found hope within its pages. The cafe became a beacon for others seeking comfort, a place where strangers became friends, and stories of struggle turned into shared moments of encouragement. Each new face, each heartfelt conversation, added layers of warmth and meaning to my life. And though I had started New Beginnings as a way to rebuild my own spirit, it had grown into something far more powerful, a place of connection, healing, and growth for everyone who entered. As the seasons changed, I found myself welcoming whatever came my way with open arms. Life was no longer a series of challenges to be endured, but an adventure to be embraced. I traveled occasionally, meeting others who shared similar stories, and each journey added new chapters to the life I was so proud to call my own. In the stillness of each evening, I would stand in the quiet cafe, letting the memories of the day settle around me like a gentle embrace. I had come so far, transformed pain into strength, and found peace in places I hadn't thought to look. And as I turned off the lights and locked the doors each night, I felt a profound sense of contentment, knowing that I was no longer defined by my past but empowered by it. Life was mine to shape, filled with endless possibilities, and I was ready to embrace every beautiful, uncharted moment ahead. In the months that followed, I found myself savoring every facet of the life I had crafted, appreciating even the smallest of moments. Each sunrise felt like a reminder of renewal, of how far I'd come, and each day brought new faces and stories that enriched my world. New beginnings continued to flourish, becoming a safe haven for those who needed it most, a place where people could come as they were, free from judgment. The community grew, bound together by shared experiences and mutual support. We began hosting weekly gatherings where people would come together to discuss resilience, healing, and personal growth. It was beautiful to witness, people opening up, sharing parts of themselves they'd hidden, and finding solace in the presence of others. The cafe had become a symbol of second chances, of strength reclaimed, and I was humbled to see the impact it had on the lives of those who entered. One evening, after the cafe had closed, I sat alone by the window, watching as a light drizzle began to fall outside. The sound of the rain was soothing, each drop a quiet reassurance that life, with all its challenges, was still beautiful. I thought about the journey I had taken, the darkness I had emerged from, and the freedom I now held so close. There was no fear, no looking over my shoulder, only the joy of knowing I was exactly where I was meant to be. In that stillness, I felt an overwhelming gratitude for everything. For the pain that had become my strength, for the solitude that had taught me to love myself, and for the connections that had brought color back into my life. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving, and the world around me was a reflection of the peace I had fought so hard to find. As I turned off the lights and prepared to head home, a soft smile played on my lips. This life, filled with resilience, compassion, and endless possibility, was the one I had built for myself, one beautiful moment at a time. And as I stepped out into the rain, I knew that whatever lay ahead, I was ready, strong, free, and endlessly hopeful for all the wonders yet to come. The next morning, I opened the cafe doors to the soft light of dawn, feeling a deep sense of peace as I prepared for the day. The quiet hum of the early hours was my favorite time, before the world rushed in, when everything felt still and full of possibility. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the sounds of birds singing outside, and I couldn't help but smile. I had built a life that felt like home, both for myself and for others seeking solace. As the morning unfolded, familiar faces trickled in, each bringing their own warmth and stories. A regular, an elderly man who often came to read by the window, shared a story with me that morning about a love he'd lost decades ago. There was sadness in his eyes, but also acceptance, as he spoke about how he'd finally made peace with his past. His words resonated deeply, a reminder that healing is a lifelong journey, and I was grateful to be a part of his, even in this small way. Throughout the day, I noticed little acts of kindness exchanged among patrons. A stranger helping another carry their order, a quiet conversation turning into laughter, and new friendships blossoming over shared tables. New Beginnings had become a community in itself, a place where people found comfort not just in the space but in each other. It was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. Later, as I tidied up, I noticed a young woman leave a note on the counter. She'd been coming in for weeks, always sitting by herself, her expression pensive. I picked up the note after she left and unfolded it, finding a simple message: "Thank you for this place. It's given me the courage to start again." I held the note for a moment, feeling a surge of gratitude and purpose. This cafe, born from my own journey of healing, had become a place of hope and new beginnings for others too. And in that quiet realization, I understood the true impact of turning pain into something meaningful. As evening settled, I locked up, casting one last look around the cafe, now dim and peaceful. The chairs were neatly tucked in, the tables gleaming under the soft glow of the lights, each corner filled with memories of laughter, healing, and connection. I had found my purpose, my peace, and my place in the world. And as I walked home under the evening sky, I felt an overwhelming sense of joy. I had built a life rooted in resilience, filled with kindness and community. My story was no longer just my own. It was woven into the lives of those around me, each of us finding strength, hope, and new beginnings together. The future stretched before me, endless and bright, and I was ready to embrace it all with an open heart and an unshakable spirit. In the weeks that followed, new beginnings continued to thrive, and with it so did I. The cafe had become a gathering place, a small oasis in the world where people found comfort and connection, and each day was a reminder of the beauty of second chances. The walls, now filled with artwork and handwritten notes left by patrons, seemed to tell their own story, a tapestry of hope and resilience that reflected the heart of the community. One afternoon, a young man stopped by with his guitar, asking if he could play a few songs. I agreed, and as his music filled the cafe, people paused, listening, the melody weaving through conversations and creating an atmosphere of warmth. It reminded me of how far I'd come, from a life defined by control and fear to one overflowing with creativity and freedom. Each note he played felt like a celebration of that transformation. As the music drifted into the evening, I watched as people shared smiles, glances, and laughter. A simple yet powerful reminder of how healing it is to feel truly seen and understood. I knew that each person in the cafe that night had their own story, their own battles and triumphs, and together we were creating something greater than any one of us alone. One evening, after closing up, I took a moment to sit by the window, looking out at the street as the city lights flickered on. The cafe was quiet, filled with the lingering warmth of the day's laughter and conversation. I realized that in building this space, I had not only created a haven for others, but had also healed my own heart in ways I hadn't anticipated. Life had become a journey of shared experiences, of finding strength in vulnerability and joy in simple moments. As I stood to leave, locking the door behind me, I felt a calmness that went beyond words, a deep, abiding peace in knowing that I had reclaimed my life, transformed my pain, and created something beautiful from it all. Walking home that night, the stars overhead, I felt the vastness of the future waiting before me, filled with possibilities I hadn't dared to dream of before. I knew that whatever came next, I was ready, strong, unafraid, and endlessly grateful for this life I'd crafted, one filled with hope, connection, and the unbreakable joy of true freedom. As the seasons turned, I found myself reflecting on the cycles of change that had brought me here. The cafe thrived, and with each passing day, it grew more vibrant, more alive, a sanctuary of warmth amid the rush of the world. People came and went, yet each left an indelible mark, a piece of their story etched into the heart of new beginnings. One autumn afternoon, I received a letter from a woman who'd traveled across the country to visit the cafe after reading my book. She shared how my story had helped her find the courage to leave a relationship that had left her feeling lost and small. Reading her words, I felt humbled, a gentle reminder that even the darkest moments of my journey had a purpose. I reached out to her, and in our exchange, we spoke of new beginnings, of the strength found in rebuilding, and of the beauty in discovering one's worth. Moments like these filled my life with meaning. They were quiet yet profound reminders of the ripple effect of resilience, of how our stories, both shared and personal, could inspire and heal. I began hosting workshops at the cafe, inviting people to share their own experiences, and the sessions grew into intimate gatherings where people opened up, forged bonds, and found courage in each other's company. I witnessed transformation in real time, the courage in their eyes, the relief in their laughter, and I knew that New Beginnings was becoming more than just a cafe. It was a community built on the foundation of hope. One evening, after a particularly moving workshop, I sat in the cafe alone, reflecting on the journey that had led me here. The air was thick with memories, each corner filled with stories of growth and resilience. I closed my eyes, feeling the quiet hum of contentment settle within me, a peace that went beyond mere happiness, rooted in a life lived with purpose and authenticity. As I locked up and stepped out into the cool night, I felt the fullness of this journey, the depth of every choice, every step forward. Life stretched before me, filled with endless horizons, and I walked toward it, knowing that I had created not only a life of freedom, but one of deep, unshakable joy. Whatever the future held, I was ready, heart open and spirit unbreakable, knowing that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Winter arrived, casting the cafe in a warm glow that felt even cozier against the chill outside. New Beginnings had become a sanctuary from the cold, a place where people gathered to share laughter, warmth, and moments that felt like home. It was a beautiful time of year, with holiday lights twinkling in the windows and seasonal decorations adorning every corner. People brought friends and family, sharing stories over mugs of hot cocoa and coffee, and the cafe buzzed with a sense of togetherness. One snowy evening, a group of regulars surprised me by organizing a small celebration at the cafe. They brought homemade treats, decorations, and a handwritten card filled with messages of gratitude and love. Each note told a story, a little piece of their lives that had been touched by this place. As I read through their words, I felt a swell of emotion, a profound realization that this small cafe had become a lifeline for so many, just as it had been for me. That night, we shared stories, laughter, and music, the warmth of friendship filling the room. Someone brought a guitar, and as familiar tunes drifted through the air, people sang along, their voices blending in a chorus that felt as comforting as a warm embrace. I watched as everyone laughed and danced, finding joy in the simplicity of the moment, and I felt a deep, abiding gratitude for this chosen family I'd found. After everyone had left, I stayed behind to tidy up, pausing by the window to watch the snow falling softly outside. The streetlights cast a gentle glow over the blanket of white, and the world felt calm, peaceful, like it was holding its breath in reverence for the moment. In that stillness, I felt something settle within me, a quiet knowing that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The journey that had once felt so daunting had brought me here, to a life filled with love, purpose, and the kind of peace that only comes from facing one's shadows and emerging stronger on the other side. I turned off the lights and locked the door, stepping out into the snow-covered street, my heart light and full. As I walked home, the snow crunching beneath my feet, I felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment, a joy that wasn't fleeting but deeply rooted. My life had become a mosaic of every choice, every hardship, and every small victory. And in that winter night, under the stars and snowfall, I knew that my story was far from over. It was only the beginning of a life lived freely, joyfully, and authentically, one beautiful moment at a time. The new year arrived with fresh beginnings and a renewed sense of purpose. I looked forward to every morning at New Beginnings, eager to see the familiar faces that had become part of my extended family, and meet the new ones who walked through the doors each day. The cafe continued to be a place of stories, where people connected, healed, and celebrated life's small joys. It had become everything I had dreamed of and more, a testament to the resilience and hope we each carried. With the momentum of the new year, I began exploring new ways to expand the reach of the cafe's mission. I connected with local organizations and hosted events focused on empowerment and community support. We organized donation drives, community service days, and storytelling nights, where people could share their journeys in a supportive space. Each event deepened the sense of connection, and the cafe became a vibrant hub of love and kindness, where everyone felt welcome. One afternoon, while setting up for a community event, I received a message from an old friend. She'd heard about the cafe and wanted to reconnect. At first, a tinge of nervousness washed over me, remnants of the past I'd worked so hard to move beyond. But I realized that reconnecting could be another chapter in my journey of healing, a chance to embrace my growth and see how far I'd come. When we met, we talked for hours, catching up on life and all that had changed. She was surprised but genuinely happy to see the person I had become, stronger, happier, and deeply at peace. I shared my journey, and as I spoke, I felt any remaining ties to the past dissolve, replaced by a profound sense of closure. It was a moment of full-circle healing, an affirmation that I was free from the weight of what once was. The cafe continued to flourish, each day a new chapter filled with laughter, connection, and quiet moments of reflection. My life had become an unfolding story of resilience, compassion, and joy. A story that, as I had discovered, was shared by everyone who crossed the threshold of new beginnings. And as I looked toward the future, I felt a boundless excitement for all that lay ahead. My life, once steeped in uncertainty, was now rooted in purpose and love. Whatever challenges or triumphs the future held, I was ready, heart open and spirit unbreakable, knowing that the journey was and always would be beautifully mine. As the months went by, New Beginnings became a cornerstone of the community, a place where people could gather, find solace, and share their dreams. It had grown beyond anything I'd ever imagined, with people contributing their own touches, books they loved, handmade crafts, even plants that now adorn the shelves. Each edition felt like a gift, a piece of someone's heart left behind to make the cafe feel more like home for everyone who entered. One evening, we hosted an open mic night where people shared stories, poetry, and songs. The energy in the room was electric, a blend of laughter and heartfelt moments. And as I watched, I realized that New Beginnings had become not just a cafe, but a place where people could feel seen, heard, and valued. A young woman took the stage, visibly nervous as she shared a poem about her own struggles and the journey she was on to find her voice. The audience responded with applause and encouragement, and I felt a pang of familiarity in her words, a reminder of my own path, of the courage it took to build this life. She looked out at the crowd, tears in her eyes, and thanked everyone for listening. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the community we had all created together. As the night drew to a close, several people approached me, thanking me for creating a space where they felt safe to express themselves. Their words reminded me of my initial vision for New Beginnings, a place of healing, resilience, and connection. And here it was, manifesting in ways I could never have predicted, but that felt perfectly right. The next morning, I found a note left on one of the tables. It read, "Thank you for this place. It has given me the strength to believe in myself again." Holding the note, I realized that New Beginnings had not only transformed my life, but was helping others find their own way, giving them the hope and courage to start anew. And with each day that passed, I felt my purpose deepen, my heart expand, knowing that I was part of something greater than myself. As I looked around at the cafe, alive with the energy of people who had found a little piece of themselves here, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. This journey, this life, was more beautiful and fulfilling than anything I'd ever imagined. And as I stepped into the future, I felt ready for all that lay ahead, knowing that whatever came next, I had found my place in the world, a place filled with love, hope, and the unbreakable joy of new beginnings. In the weeks that followed, I increasingly felt the fullness and completeness of this stage of my life. New Beginnings continued to thrive, filling the days with not only my own joy, but the joy of everyone who crossed its threshold. This place became a true symbol of hope and healing for all of us. And with each passing day, I realized more deeply how it was this journey, with all its challenges and triumphs, that brought me to true freedom and peace. With the coming of spring, I decided to hold a small ceremony, a kind of celebration of the anniversary of the opening of the cafe. People who have become an integral part of the New Beginnings community gathered, and together we shared stories of change, dreams, and the significance of this new chapter in our lives. The warmth and light emanating from each person in the room was incredible, and I felt like we weren't just celebrating an anniversary, but celebrating life itself. That night, looking at the faces of those who have become true family to me, I realized that this journey has given me something priceless. I had found not only peace and self-love, but also a true purpose, to be a source of strength and inspiration for others. I had finally found my place in the world, and it was beautiful. When the celebration was over and I was alone, standing in the silence of New Beginnings, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life had become something amazing and beautiful, filled with true freedom and peace. And as soon as I turned off the lights and closed the door behind me, I I felt a whole universe of new possibilities and happy moments ahead of me. I now knew that no matter what the future held, I was ready to embrace it with an open heart and unwavering confidence, because this story was just the beginning.